Okie doke. Welcome back. Welcome back. This section of the talk is really about trauma-sensitive practices, and um, we're going to start from a little bit of a different place. Trauma-sensitive practices have been, or trauma-informed practices are taught all over the place. I believe that some of the messages backfire, which is why I think it's so important that we are trauma sensitive. Not only because I care about what we do, but because I also care that the teaching itself does not re-traumatize the people who are listening. Because you can know that a lot of people, especially people drawn to youth services, have been traumatized. So there's a couple things to know. One is people talk a lot about how trauma affects the body, brain, and behavior, and it does. But what it means is that certain things are more likely to happen. There is an increased relative risk. It doesn't mean it's going to happen. So even in the world of medicine, if something had a 5 times increased risk, that is huge. And that lights off bells in the world of epidemiologic medicine. But if something is only 2% likely to happen, and even you have this huge increased predictor, it's still only 10% likely to happen. What it tells you is that you are deserving of most focused attention and extra protective forces. Because just as there are risk factors, which trauma is one, so too there are protective forces. Another very important thing to know is that results do not go in both directions. In other words, for example, you're more likely to be obese if you're traumatized. That's true. But you can't look at an obese person and say they're obese because they were traumatized. It doesn't work like that. And people don't explain that. Most importantly to me, spiritually, is understanding that people come with a different kind of credential. That the people who have had the hardest lives really bring a tremendous amount to the world. And we've got to always say that as well. This is the original study. And most of you, or many of you, are familiar with this. It too looked at 18,000 people in San Diego County from the ages of 18 to 85. And it did all the things studies always do. They asked people about their health. Then they did what many studies already did, which is they asked them about their emotional status, their mental status, whether they use drugs, whether they've been divorced, the social questions. But then they went a step further. And they asked them, what happened to you in the house you grew up with? Emphasis on house. Were you emotionally abused, physically abused, sexually abused, neglected? Were you exposed to substance use, mental illness, or domestic violence? Were either or both of your parents incarcerated, and were they divorced, or did you experience parental abandonment? For everything you said yes to, they gave you a score of 1. And then they divided you into categories of 0, ACE scores, adverse childhood experience scores, of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or above. So the point is, the first point I want to make is not all things are equal, so the score may not work. Number 2, this is all about what happens in your household, not everything else. Number 3, it stops at 4. I will tell you the kids that I work with, I've never met a 4, right? And on this list. On this list, they're 8s or 9s. Along comes this study, which is done by Roy Wade, who's actually a mentee of mine in Philadelphia, really looking at community-based experiences. Now you've added racism and poverty and bullying and exposure to violence. And you're able to come up with the expanded ACEs, which is really a score up to 14. And now what we know is this. We know that childhood trauma affects the body. You are more likely to be obese, to have high blood pressure, to have heart disease, strokes, to have cancers, to have lupus. You are more likely to die of brittle bones or osteoporosis as an 85-year-old if you were neglected as a child. This is astounding. We also know that it affects your brain, that when you've been traumatized, you are more likely to do things, certain behaviors that don't surprise us, like drugs and be divorced or be incarcerated. But we also understand the roots of this because brain pathways are hypervigilant, looking for danger, and make you highly reactive. What is astounding is that we now understand that it even affects your genetics, what you pass along to your children. But I will tell you that all of that bad news is not why I'm here. I'm not the bad news guy. I'm the guy in the trauma sensitive movement who is making this your most important slide to know. Actually, there is a robust body of research that is in parallel to the trauma research that says that, yes, bad things can happen to you, but when you are surrounded by loving and caring adults, you end up having, you still might have problems, but they're going to be heavily buffered and you're going to look very much like everybody else. What is this about? I'm going to give you what we know, and then I'm going to give you what I'd call a Ginsburg theory, which is, it makes sense to me, but I can't prove it. Here's what we know. We know that the grandmother is protective in the kid's life. But what is going on? What is going on is that, remember, you're always ready to jump when you have trauma surrounding you, right? If you're always ready to jump, what do you need? You need your blood pressure to be high. Otherwise, when you jump, you faint. What hormone creates high blood pressure? It is cortisol. Cortisol also, to create high blood pressure, makes you drink more water, eat more food, and ingest more salts. Now you understand obesity and diabetes. You understand high blood pressure. You understand heart disease and strokes. But what else is cortisol? If you go to a pharmacy and you say, I have a rash, what are they going to give you? Hydrocortisone, because it's an immune suppressant. Well, when you have been bathed in an immune suppressant throughout your childhood, then what happens is your immune system either resets and gets downgraded, which means things like cancer are going to slip by, or it becomes dysregulated, which is doctor talk for wacky, which means you're more likely to get things like lupus. So we know that a repeated exposure to stress, environmental or household, will make you more likely to change your endocrine set points, meaning your glands that let out hormones permanently throughout your life and to your children. But we also know that, and may affect your immune system. We also know that if your grandma is there, and if your grandma is saying, Ken, if your daddy comes home drunk, you're sleeping with me tonight. Ken, if the boys outside are asking you to come out, don't go out tonight, because you know what? Just tell them that you need to take care of your grandma. Because when my grandma does that, I am buffered, I am protected. And what is happening quite literally is I am borrowing her hypervigilance. I am borrowing her ability to see the environment. Indeed, I'm borrowing her brain pathways, I'm borrowing her cortisol, and therefore I do not need to mount my own. And that is the power of human love and protection. That when we watch for the kids, when we watch out for the kids, when we are vigilant for them, they needn't reshape their brains. When we watch for those uncertain things in the environment, they needn't be ready to jump at any moment. And thereby we break the cycle of trauma and oppression biologically. What do ACEs do to your brain and to your behavior? We talked a little bit about brain. What it does is it makes that part of your brain, which in this picture is the green part, which is your amygdala, brilliant. It is on fire. It is so smart. It makes the red part of your brain, which is your ability to think, it makes it a little bit less organized because you're always running from tigers. And what does that do to your behavior? So the first thing it does to your behavior is it makes you more reactive. I have to tell you that that's really hard for me. Why? Because I'm a really calm guy. I value calm. And when people are really reactive, like, think road rage, think the guy who yells at the person in the theater who spills their popcorn, really hard for me to deal with. Another thing it makes you is a little bit less likely to trust people, right? Really hard for me to not be trusted. I did 12 years of research on human trust. And when you don't trust me, it just hurts. What else does it do? It makes you more likely to lie. I'm not saying everybody lies. It makes you more likely to lie. Why is that? Because if you grow up in a house where your dad comes home and says, hey, who took the last hot dog? And you say, I did, Daddy, and he throws you against the wall, you stop seeing hot dogs. And it also makes, but it's hard for me because I care so much about honesty. And when I'm getting a history from you, I have to kind of know what's really going on. So it's really hard for me. And another thing is it might make you more likely to confabulate, to kind of make up stories based on things that aren't true. Why is that? Or it might make you more likely to dissociate, meaning withdraw from reality. And if you've ever noticed, that you're with a kid and you're close to him, and then you get close to her truth, and then all of a sudden she's in Disneyland. Why is that? Because when bad things were happening to you, you remember the water stain on the ceiling and the Super Bowl stain on the wall, but you don't remember what happened to you, and that was the most protective force in your life. But it's really hard for me when people dissociate from me, don't trust me, don't engage with me, lie to me, are reactive. It's so hard for me because it kind of goes against everything that I am. If I think it's about me, and that's where trauma-sensitive training begins. All of these behaviors are not about you. And if you think they are about you, then you're going to become defensive, and becoming defensive is only one step away from becoming offensive. Make no mistake about it. And so the first step, when I say I know what's not about me, which is the first principle of trauma-sensitive practices, when I say that, I'm not trying to create a barrier, quite the opposite. I'm trying to create a boundary that allows me to engage. It means you can throw daggers at me and I can deflect them because I know they were never about me. It means it can be harder to engage with you, and I know that I just need to try harder. It's not a rejection of who I am as a human being. So this is the beginning of trauma-sensitive practices. So again, how do we react to behavior? You know, if you go to my hospital and you ask them to describe me, and you know, they'll tell you, Dr. Ken is really chill, he calms things down, he manages lots of problems so that they don't escalate. But if I'm rounding with you, I will tell people my secret. And my secret to being incredibly calm is that I'm faking it. Totally. I'm in my head all the time, saying to myself, this is not about me. This is what's likely to happen. And this is based on the person's pain, not on me. This slide, for me, is the slide that really feels the very most spiritual. It is this thing I'm about to describe to you that I believe can transform a person's life in one conversation. So what happens is kids are reactive, and then we label that reactivity. And we label the reactivity depending on who's doing the assessment and what resources we can give the kid. But the very same reactive behavior can earn you a lot of labels. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes for a moment and to hear how you respond viscerally to these labels. This is Patty. She's depressed. This is Barbara. She's anxious. This is Louise. She's experienced trauma in her life. This is Billy. He is oppositional. This is Juan. He has conduct disorder. This is Lakeisha. She has intermittent explosive disorder. This is Kenny. He has ADHD. Open your eyes. The very same reactive behaviors can earn you any of these labels. But above all, the kids who have had the hardest lives have been told they have an anger problem. What's wrong with that? You have an anger problem. The word is you, problem. That's what they hear. It changes the way people see themselves and the way systems interact with them. When you know that someone's depressed, you want to embrace them. When you know that someone's anxious, you want to calm them. When you know that someone's been traumatized, you want to heal them. But when you think that someone has an anger problem, has intermittent explosive disorder, has conduct disorder, or oppositional defiant disorder, you want to shut them down. You want to control them. And that is poisonous. It changes the way people see themselves and the way systems interact with them. And I don't think you're going to be surprised to know that these labels are given with a sharp racial bias. And that if you are Black, Latinx, or Indigenous, you are more likely to be told you're oppositional defiant. And being told you're oppositional defiant feeds the school to prison pipeline because you are separated from people. So I work with kids at Competence House, and what do? This is the conversation. This is not only in reaching teens very explicitly, but if PJ reminds me later, I will give you a choreograph so you can have just this piece of it. So you ask a kid to tell you about themselves. many kids who have been through the systems are going to start with, I have an anger problem. And then I'm just going to say something like, I'll bet you've earned it, huh? And then I'm going to ask a series of questions, and it always goes the same way. Tell me, do you see things that other people don't see? And the kids will tell you they have intuition. They can look between someone's eyes and know when they're in trouble, or when they are trouble, excuse me. And they'll just tell you this. I say, tell me, do you have good friends? And many kids will say, well, the people you'd call good friends, I'd call family, but otherwise mostly associates. Yeah, if they're in trouble, do you do what it takes to protect them? Always. You have any brothers or sisters? Yeah, I have a little brother and 2 little sisters. Do you do what it takes to watch out for them? Absolutely always. They're my heart. I'm not going to let what happened to me happen to them. When you see danger coming, whether it's to you or your siblings, or whether it's to a friend, do you do what it takes to protect them? Always. I'm not going to let it happen again. Dude, you know what? You have a protector's brain, and you've earned it. You've got compassion, you see danger, and you are committed to making it okay for other people. And if I was on a desert island, I would want you with me, because you would take care of me and you would keep us both safe. Man, this is your superpower. This is what you've got. Your challenge in life is going to be to know when to keep your cape tucked in, because you might see danger other people don't see. And sometimes it's not going to really be there. And I wonder if we can work together so you can tell the difference between when you're really safe and you don't need to bring out your superpower, and when you really got to bring in all the power you've earned to protect yourself and other people. Literally, they weep. But keep in mind who I work with. I work with gang members. I work with kids who have been adjudicated, right? These are kids who have had tough lives, and they weep when they hear that something that everybody else has told them is wrong about them is actually a strength. Let me go one step deeper. Do you understand that when we tell people they have an anger problem for being reactive, for being protective, you are really, the meta message is exactly the skills you use to survive your life are wrong. You are broken. It's poison. We can do better, and I believe it begins by throwing out those labels and by beginning to recognize the truth, which is that these kids in vernacular have protectors' brains, and if you need a DSM diagnosis, then they've been traumatized. Our job is to offer radical calmness in kids amidst a chaotic reality. It's called co-regulation. What does co-regulation mean? Think like you're in a plane and there's terrible turbulence. What happens? If you look at the guy next to you who's screaming, not a good idea. What you do is you look at the flight attendant, and if they're still serving snack mix, you're chill, right? That's co-regulation. It is amygdala to amygdala communication. It is the key to de-escalation, right? Is bringing people down through our radical calmness. It is critical to anticipation, to knowing when things are rising. When you stay level and calm, you will feel the rising tide. When you're going like this, you're going to miss it rising in other people. It's the key to allowing Mother Teresa to surface. This is from an 18-year-old boy. I can just never take this slide out. An 18-year-old boy who I asked him to describe himself, and he said, I like to think of myself as, Mother Teresa, but like with an anger problem. That's literally who my kids are. The most compassionate beings on earth, but who express anger when they don't feel safe. And the key to letting Mother Teresa out is to make it so our kids feel safe. Our goal, once we co-regulate with kids, is to teach kids self-regulation skills, right? Self-regulation is not something kids have, it's something good parenting developed. And if kids don't have it, we can develop in them. So what is co-regulation? At one level, you could think it's about looking like a duck gliding on the water. And if you have a 3-year-old, this is who you want to be. Just the duck gliding on the water. But if you're working with an adolescent and you look like this guy, they're not going to relate to you. Tell them the truth. You're like a duck gliding in the water because your little feet are going like this underneath, working like heck to stay afloat. When we are truly intentional with our kids about what we are doing and model for them how we get there, then we have the ability to really help them learn self-regulation skills by modeling them. Next, how do kids who have had hard lives experience transitions differently? So your kids who have been adjudicated, your kids who have been through foster care, what you have to understand is that every new opportunity for them is a chance to be rejected entirely. That's what their life looked like. In foster care, you messed up, you went to a new home, right? What that means is that they are always looking to figure out where the tiger is, to determine if they're safe, to wonder if they're going to be judged or rejected. So how do you react? If that's what life looks like to you, what you're going to do is you're going to spend a lot of time pretending you don't care. Not because you don't care, but because you care so much it hurts. Not because you don't feel, but because you feel so fully that you wonder if you can continue to stay at that level. So what happens is kids sometimes will often act or fail fast to maintain their control. And when they do, they're never going to say, I am deeply concerned. They're going to pretend they don't care. Our challenge is to help kids know that we know that when they're saying they don't care, it's because they care so much that it literally hurts. The key principles of trauma-sensitive practices. This is my model. This is the Reaching Teens model. First one I already shared with you, which is knowing what's about you and what's not about you. Not so we draw boundaries or that are walls, but so we draw boundaries that allow us to engage fully. The second one, and this is from Sandy Bloom, who was also a Philadelphian, which is changing your lens from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. So it's not your, it's not that I want you to ask the question. I don't want you to walk in the room and go, what happened to you? Because kids aren't ready for that. It's the lens. The third, which we're going to talk about right after we get to some questions, is seeing people as they deserve to be seen, not based on labels they've received or behaviors they've displayed. And the fourth, we began this talk with, is giving control back to people from whom control has been taken away. And all the principles, everything we do in Reaching Teens is about, or in that toolkit, is about implementing these four principles. But I want you to look at these, and I want you to see that when we apply these universally, all kids rise, right? Adolescent development is about stretching limits. It's about getting more control. Figuring out who you are is about being seen, about being known, right? So when we do this, we help all kids develop. This is the Boys and Girls Club of America mission statement, which is to enable all young people, especially those who need us the most, to reach their full potential as productive, caring, responsible citizens. Here's the thing you need to know. The kids who need you the most are not the ones who are going to engage most quickly. I remember when one of my daughters, Alana, came home from her first day at a job. She was 16 years old and she was working in a aftercare setting or after school setting. And she came home to me and she said, Abby, you know what's so weird is that the cutest kids are the easiest ones to work with. That's weird. And I said, yeah, never forget that as long as you live. But it's the kid in the back of your classroom whose nose is dripping down his shirt, who's filthy and has no idea that an adult can help him wipe his nose. That's the kid who needs you the most. Kids who need us the most are the ones who push us away. Kids who need us the most are the ones who push our buttons. The kids who need us the most raise uncomfortable feelings in us. I'm sure I've already said some things that make you uncomfortable, right? Even if you do this work every day. I am uncomfortable every time a kid discloses abuse to me because it shocks me to my core, even if I hear it 4 times a day, literally, right? It still makes me uncomfortable. And youth who need us the most don't give us the feedback we crave, which is why in some way trauma-sensitive practices would be easier to teach to widget makers. You would just say, do this, do this, do this, and they would do it. We care about what people think about us. It's why we're in the human service professions. We care deeply about affirmation from teenagers. many of us do this work because of our own adolescence and still on some level want adolescents to accept us. That's a whole different boundary issue, guys, but it's true. And what that means is that we often will not give kids what they need and withdraw from kids who withdraw from us because it hurts us, right? Because of who we are as people. So this is a really important point to teach your staff. And in a ditty, trauma-sensitive practices can be summarized in this 3-line story. Nobody dared go near the tower because a fearsome dragon sat on its top, until one day a knight rode up and asked, "Do you need help to get down?" And the dragon responded, "Yes, please." That's who we need to be. I'd like to take some questions on specifically on trauma-sensitive practices, with an understanding that as soon as the questions are over, it's all going to be applied example, applied example, applied example. So I may say, wait for the answer. PJ, what do you got for me?
What can we do to help traumatized youth when we have limited contact with a child, say for an hour or 2 a week, or inconsistent contact? Also, how does working remotely with kids impact what we can do?
All right. So second part first, I don't know. We don't know, right? But we do know that working remotely is going to make it so the kids don't have the eyes and the ears. But I will tell you from my own experience and a lot of medical experiences that remote conversations can be remarkably intimate. For example, gosh, I mean, there's so much stuff in here that tells you about who I am, right? And if you were having a session with me, you could ask me about pictures, you could ask me about the books on the shelves, you could ask me why I'm living in my basement right now, which is a very long story. And the answer is that my wife and I are physically distanced because we're both doing frontline work with different populations. There's so many things that can be really intimate. Your first question, which is I only have an hour or 2 a week, is a profoundly important question and goes to that first paragraph about safe, secure, sustained relationships. It's why, assuming the person who asked the question is, say, a counselor, it's why we work using an environmental model, understanding that we can do a lot of things to raise insight, to build skills, and to get kids to begin thinking. But the real dose, the thing that makes it sustain, the thing that's going to have a lasting effect needs to be more. It's why teachers are so vitally important. Parents, of course, are the most important, but why teachers have a sustained relationship. It's why we as advocates need to be working with community members. And that if we can get the coaches, it's why Reaching Teens has a coaching portal. If we can get coaches, if we can get the priests, the imams, and the rabbis, and the pastors to really know how to connect with kids, when we can get the ladies in the neighborhood and men to know what to say to kids, the more we surround kids with these messages, the more impactful it is going to be, precisely because of the point you brought up. But at the same time, I don't want you to belittle your impact, right? Because your impact is to build the skills in the kid to be able to navigate all those forces in the world and to always have someone once a week to check back on, to say, how you doing, give me the next skill, or to help them navigate those encounters in the community that were less than ideal.
Next question. How can we share with families the importance of trauma-sensitive practices in their environment?
You know, the first thing is I have to tell you, to be just transparent with you, I don't usually talk the language of trauma with families. I don't go into nearly the detail I just did with you. What I do talk about is that people have had hard lives and have been hurt. And people have had hard lives and have been hurt are really deserving of healing. And that when we are ready to raise our kids, it's really important that we heal ourselves and know the things that we have been through so we can give the best to our kids. So I kind of use that language. You know, my parenting talks are all about resilience and positive youth development. Unless I'm teaching foster parents. If I'm teaching foster parents, then I teach them just like I taught you. But for regular parents, I think it's really hard. I use a language that's a little bit softer, but that still gets them to understand the basic issues on the importance of being calm and protective and supportive.
Question. Can you talk a little about appropriate boundaries with kids? It would be easy to constantly want to rescue or fix these troubled adolescents.
I absolutely can, and I will in detail on slide 92.
Okay. We have another question that says, how do we distinguish whether our children are depressed or if they are just being oppositional?
Yeah, so I struggle with this because I don't believe in just being oppositional, right? I think everything has its root, and that's the answer. The answer is kids are not choosing to be oppositional. Now, what is normal is for kids to stretch and to sometimes test limits. That's normal. That's not being oppositional, that's being developing, right? But the pushing back are people who haven't learned to that adults in their life can be protective. So give it time, change your framework, understand that among other problems, these labels, and I've written quite a bit on this actually, these labels have racial biases. And I'm not, for the person who asked the question, I'm not implying this about you at all. I'm just saying that we want to move away from these labels as a society.
Okay, what are your thoughts?
But very clearly, there are questions you can ask about depression that get a sense of whether a kid is in danger. But just keep in mind that the question, are you sad, does not mean you're not depressed if they say, I'm angry.
So this is a question.
I'm sorry, and one other thing, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
The other thing is when you're talking to boys, right? If you use the language of depression and sadness, many of them have not been taught they can express their emotions. So if you say things like, are you stressed? Are you angry? That's when you get like, yeah, right? And you get to their truth. When if you go like, is life hard? Are you sad? They've been taught to say no, which is a huge problem beyond the scope of this talk. Sorry, PJ, go ahead.
That's okay. We just had a couple questions that don't necessarily deal with trauma, but have been on the board from the beginning. So what are your thoughts about PBIS as a way to support high school students? How would you provide training within that framework?
So
training within that framework.
Yeah, could you spell out PBIS? I'm nearly certain that I know. Do you know what that is? I'm nearly certain I know what it is.
It's positive behavioral intervention in sports.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I asked both for myself, that is what I would have thought it was, but also because we use acronyms in interdisciplinary settings. So I am not an expert on PBIS. I know a little bit about it, and what I've seen, I've generally liked. What I believe intensely in is kind of an integrated model. And when I've looked at PBIS, I have found that unlike some programs, it generally aligns with what I'm suggesting in schools. Because what the stuff I'm teaching, and I'm going to end this talk with this, is not a replacement of other programs. It is the overall undergirding of how all programs work. Because if you don't have the adults who have the right attitude with the kids and are the kind of adults who kids need, no other program works.
Okay, one more question. So with regards to the hour or two a week, what if you are a teacher or children's pastor working with multiple kids? How can you help traumatize kids?
Yeah, so keep your radar up, look at youth interactions and see the kid who might be being bullied, which is a tremendous trauma, or the kid who's having trouble interacting. But kids can heal in group processes. And as long as the group is an authentically safe group, where it's made to be safe for everyone and where you have certain rules, which include no bullying and, really kind of anti-racist philosophies, anti-bullying philosophies, lifting everyone up, groups can be a tremendously excellent healing space for kids. What's wonderful is groups are also wonderful places to apply restorative practices, because in any group dynamics, kids will occasionally misbehave. And imagine when the group is able to clearly state why that was not good for the function in the group and why we need to welcome you back because you're such an important part of the group. So I actually think groups can be fantastic.
Okay. Do you want one more question?
I think that we should go on just time-wise because we're going to have the biggest break at the end for questions if I get through it. So what I want to do now is begin to tie it together. How do we apply these models in ways that we can develop strengths, address risks, but acknowledge trauma at the same time? So let's talk about behavioral change. Remember that behavioral change is never in one direction. You move a couple steps forward, a step back, a few steps forward, a step back, a few steps forward, several steps back, forward again. Where am I? I'm still forward, right? That's the way it is, forward and backward movement, based on being human and based on life experiences. So what do we tend to do? When I entitle my works strength-based communication, what some people believe that that might mean is being a cheerleader. This, for the person who asks boundaries, this is a major boundary issue, right? So what we do, so a young man comes to me and he says, Dr. Ken, I got straight A's, right? Everything within me wants to celebrate. I went, I'm so proud of you, man, for getting those A's. You're going to become the lawyer you dream of being, right? And I am a cheerleader. What's going to happen? The next time that that kid gets straight A's, I'm getting a call. The time after that, I'm getting a call. But over the summer, his father dies or goes to prison. His mother becomes depressed. He begins becoming the man in the household. And then school begins again. And now he's waking up at 5 in the morning to make breakfast for his 2 little brothers and his little sister. He's getting them to school. He's doing their homework. He's giving them baths. He's doing prayers with them before they go to bed. He begins his work at 11 and is awake again at 5 in the morning. He falls asleep in class. And when he falls asleep in class, the teacher says, why are you even here if you don't care enough to stay awake? And now he's getting C's and D's. Will I ever know? I will not know. Why? Because I have made him think, because he will not want to disappoint me is the answer. I have made him think that my relationship was based on all that he was doing good and right. And when he is not doing things right, then he is going to not include me in his life. So what is the simplest intervention that you could, in a 15-minute meeting with each of your interventions, teach? It could be one film from Reaching Teens, or you could just take it from this talk. And that is to change the way you talk from I'm so proud of you because to I'm so happy you came to me. That's it, right? So the same kid who comes to me and who says, Dr. Ken, I get straight A's, I go, I am so proud of the fact that you are always including me in your life. Thank you, right? And have a few different lines like that. He's still going to come to you when he gets straight A's, but he's also going to come to you when his life is falling apart. See, the other thing to know about behavioral change is that confidence gets the progress started and shame and demoralization prevent action. So our job to initiate behavioral change is to build confidence in people by building on what is already good and right. So I'm not talking about products here. I'm now talking about who you are. So this kid is smoking marijuana and he's 16 years old. This kid is selling drugs, devastating to his community. The kid who's smoking marijuana, devastating to his brain. The kid who is, this girl's 15 years old and she wants to become pregnant. What does the adult model do? We inform kids of the problems, we shame them, we scare them. So we look at the young man who's smoking marijuana. We're like, young man, marijuana will fry your brain. It'll make you grow breasts. It'll shrink you down there. All of which is true-ish. But how does he respond? Thanks, doc. Because why was he smoking in the first place? Because he was stressed. And me telling him that he was going to shrink down there, true-ish as it might be, didn't exactly alleviate his stress. And what it did is instead it turned him right back to the drug, right? So what are we going to do differently? We are going to listen deeply. And we are going to listen for all that is good and right. And we are going to listen for behaviorally operational strengths. What I mean by that is no more the kid's friendly, I like his hair, I talked about the sports teams, we talked about her nails, no more of that. If you want to do a line or two of that, go ahead. But listen hard. Listen for the strengths that they possess. The very strengths that mean they have the seeds of success within them. Not you, them. This is also for the person who asked about the 1 hour intervention. If you plant their seeds so that they take it out of your office, then the intervention is sustained. And we're going to get there in a minute. All right. So now you're listening for a kid who's resilient in a life that might have destroyed you, compassionate beyond measure, well-earned compassion. You're talking about the kid who has insight beyond his years. The kid who cares about the child that they've just delivered. The kid who cares about their community. The kid who cares about justice and equity. You're listening for these incredibly operational strengths, and you recognize them and you build upon them. So that kid who is smoking marijuana, we are going to recognize that that is rooted in his sensitivity and the depth and breadth of his feeling. We are going to celebrate that. But in a way that I'm going to show you in a minute, we are going to redirect that. But we are going to start there and overtake the field. So strength-based communication is not about flattery, nor is it about denial of the problems in kids' lives. It is about building on their strengths. Love. Love is seeing someone as they deserve to be seen, as they really are, not through the lens of the behaviors they sometimes need to display, nor through the labels they've received. You know, I don't use the word love with kids because as long as you're speaking English, then love has other meanings as well, right? But I demonstrate loving kindness. And I need you to know something else. Loving is not liking. Loving is a very active process. Liking is subjective. There's a lot of people I don't like, even some of my kids, right? And I don't have to like the kids to love them, to see all that is good and right and what they bring to the table. So here is counseling 101. You get out of your head and into your body. You understand, you listen to your body, and you counsel in this way. Let's be clear. I do not touch myself with the kids. I do not talk about these words. I do not talk about love, but rather this is the choreograph. So you listen to a kid until you love them. There's a part of your body that will literally flutter, and that is your heart. There's a reason that Valentine's Day and whenever we speak about love, we talk about the heart. It's not random. It is because there really are visceral sensations within the heart. But there's another part of your body that tells you when you worry, and that is your gut. And that's why you say things like, I don't know, I have a gut instinct, or it's like he kicked me in the gut. It's because this part of your body goes, ooh, God, I love this kid, but oh, I'm worried because. Head, I plan. Hands, I work with you in your journey. So now, let's look at that young man who's smoking marijuana. Man, I listened to your story, and you've been through so much. And a man like you, you know, you're deeply sensitive. And I know that hurts. I know that hurts. But let me tell you something, man. A kid, a person who is sensitive and who cares like you do, I know it hurts when you're 16, but you're going to be the best father, the best lover, the best boss, the best colleague. It's your superpower, heart. Pause, deep breath. But I have to tell you, I am so worried right now because you're smoking marijuana. A lot of it. Do you know anybody who smokes 24/7? What are they like? Chilling? Yeah, how much do they get done? God forbid you would be permanently chilled. And a man with your breadth of emotions and your high intelligence would get nothing done because you took away your sensitivity in a cloud of smoke. Can we work together to come up with a way that we can deal with all the emotions you have instead without giving away your superpower? Because if we do, I'll be there with you or get you where you need to go so you can be everything you're destined to be. Heart, I care. This is why I'm on your team. Belly, I feel, and this is why I want something to change. Head, I plan with you. Hands, I'm not abandoning you. I'm getting you to the next place in your journey. That's counseling 101. And how do we make it so that that 1 or 2 hour intervention that we have, or for me, sometimes, honestly, it's an hour period, because I'm working with young people who are homeless or trafficked. How do we get it to be sustained? And the answer is by helping kids know that they possess the strength and have always possessed the strength. So this model is about giving kids their ruby slippers. And in case you're too young to remember what this is the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy lands in Oz. She thinks she has no power. She's trying to give it away and take it from different people, but nobody can give it to her. Not the Tin Man, not the Scarecrow, not the Lion, not even the mythical Oz. And at the end, she learns that she always had the power within herself, within her ruby slippers, if she just tapped them together. That is a secure and sustained relationship, is when someone understands that they possess the strength themselves. And then what's going to happen? Next major boundary issue. You take on this loving approach, let me tell you what's going to happen. People are going to love you back, right? And you're going to hear all the time, Dr. Ken, you're the best doctor I've ever met. If you were in my life earlier, I'd be cool. And that feels great. I love it. The problem is if I own that, I've hurt the kid, because that's a boundary violation, because I'm not going home with him and I'm not going to navigate the rest of his life. I've got to give him his ruby slippers. I've got to let him know why I saw what I saw. And I hold the mirror back to him and I go, man, what you're reacting to is just that I saw you. Do you know why I saw you? I saw you because you chose to show me you. Do that with other people and you're good to go. You hold the mirror up. Now let's talk about giving youth control over their decisions. So we've begun by seeing all that is good and right, and that makes kids know that they have the potential of achieving control. Now let's begin taking it to the next level through communication. We have to learn to stop undermining kids' competence. We have to talk in ways that young people understand, and that begins by recognizing the cognitive development of adolescence. So I'm a 5-year-old. How do I think? I am a concrete thinker. I see things right in front of me. I don't understand complexity. I don't understand nuance. I don't understand that people can be highly manipulative. Here, I'm an adult. I'm an abstract thinker. I understand that people can be full of crap. I understand that people can be manipulative. And I learn all of that through experience. What is adolescence? It's the process of change. So I'm a 14-year-old girl and a guy says, I love you. Do I say, I question the veracity of that statement? Indeed, I do. No, I say, I love you too. Right? And then what does he say? You got to do something to show me how much you love me. And where is he? The next day, he's gone. And she has moved a little bit towards abstract thinking. She understands manipulation. She may not fall for that particular line. All right? That is what development is about. So the best way for kids to develop is for adults to get out of their way. But we don't do that because these are our daughters and our sons and our patients and our clients. So what do? We tell them. And how do we tell them? We give them lectures. So lectures number 1 are hot communication. Feel the heat in what I'm about to do. Don't you know that what you're doing right now, which I'm going to call behavior A, could easily lead to consequence B? If consequence B happens, you're more than likely to go on to consequence C. I never imagined my son doing consequence C. Now I wonder what's between your ears besides cobwebs. If consequence C happens, you're more than likely to go on to consequence D, which is more than likely to go on to consequence E, which you never would have done if you didn't begin hanging out with Joey, whose own mother doesn't love him. If consequence E happens, you're going to go on it. Look at me, young man, when I'm talking to you. This isn't for my own good. If consequence E happens, you're more than likely to go on to consequence F, which is a slippery slope down to consequence G, which almost always leads to consequence H. And maybe, just maybe, you will go to consequence I. And do you know what happens with consequence I? You die is what happens. And what does the kid hear? Womp, 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 womp. Die. It was hot. It was hot because it was condescending, it was angry. So you're speaking purely to the amygdala, which means they're not going to be able to plan. They're not going to be able to think things through. It was also hot because it was abstract, right? A goes to B, which goes to C. There are several intervening variables that will make a difference to the ultimate outcome. That is algebra. That looks like this equation. And let me tell you something, people do not, when they are running from a tiger, they can't figure this out. If they're not developmentally ready, they can't figure this out. And if they're not intelligent enough, they can't figure this out. So what that means is that what they're hearing is womp, 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 die. What we have to do instead is remain calm, never lecture, and speak in simple mathematical terms. You're thinking about doing behavior A. I think I get that, but I worry that it can lead to behavior B. What are your thoughts about that? What have you done to make sure that that doesn't happen? And only when they are at B, do you take them to C. That could be the next week that you have your 1 hour with them. It could be the next day. It could be a month later. But the goal is to get them to get it, got it, own it. You're giving them control. And when they own it, there's nothing to rebel against. When you lecture kids, you're setting them up to be oppositional because it is in opposition to their need for development and self-control. I'm going to give you two pretty dramatic examples. They are exactly as they happened, except my words are a little bit more accurate than the pictures because the pictures do not capture everything. So the first thing is a choreographed conversation. I almost never do pictures. I do a few dramatic charts a year. Mostly I talk. But when I talk, I know where I'm going. What is choreography? It's very planned movement, but should look very spontaneous, right? So I know where I'm going. I've mapped it out in my head. I know where I need to take the kid, but I'm going to go one step at a time so that they get it, got it. Mostly I just do this verbally. This girl that I'm about to describe to you, she needed a real think through on this. This is a 14-year-old girl. Both my examples are 14-year-old girls, which is not surprising because that's the middle of adolescence where abstract thought is just developing and where the amygdala is very, very strong. So this girl comes to me in a school-based clinic. She has blood on her eye, which is called a scleral hemorrhage. In medicine, it's like the easiest thing to deal with because you just go, oh, can you see all right, darling? Don't worry, it'll go away. That's the intervention. But I asked her what happened, and she said she got in a fight. I asked her what made her mad enough to fight. And she told me that she took a class trip to New York City. She wore a t-shirt that she bought there. The next day at school, a girl called her fat, but that didn't make her mad enough to fight. But then the girl called her mother a garden tool. She was not going to take that, so she fought. Before I let her out of my office, I got to know something. I got to know if this is over. So I said, what's going to happen now? And she said to me, I'm going to kill her. That's why I brought this knife to school, and she pats her pocket. Now, does she really want to kill her? No. She didn't expect me to go, is it sharp enough? Right? But now, imagine the lecture. Don't you know your life is flying before your eyes? You could die. You could never walk again. You could end up shaming your mother, end up in prison. Why am I not going to do that? Because it's hot communication, because she's not going to get it. She's going to rebel against me. I'm going to push her into the behavior. But there's another reason. She has a knife, right? I don't know how to deal with a kid with a knife. I know how to make them not use it, but I don't know how to deal with it once it's pulled, right? So this calm measure is self-protective as well. And I said, keep your knife in your pocket, but I want you to take out this pen. And I took a magic marker and I said, let's think this through. And I began drawing on a piece of paper. And I said, let's do this very slowly, but go ahead and stab me. She stabs me slowly. I take it out of her hand and I stab her in the back. all while calmly writing down each step. I'm talking it through. I'm mostly listening to her responses, which I can't mimic for you. So the first thing is you fight and she uses her knife first. You're stabbed in the back. And what that means is that you're left in a wheelchair. Had you imagined this happening? No. But could it happen? No. Do you know anybody who it's happened to? And she said, well, there's this guy on my block who was shot and he's in a chair. And there's this woman who has to go in a bag because she got all cut up. And I was like, oh. So do you think those people planned for that to happen? Well, that's stupid. Well, then what happened? I don't know. Things got out of hand. But they won't get out of hand for you? No. Well, what do you want to have happen? I keep telling you, I want to kill her. Okay, let's do this again. This time she goes to stab me, and I take it out of my pocket first and stab her. So you fight, but she uses her knife first, and you're stabbed in the heart. You're dead. Can you imagine this might happen? No. What do you want to have happen? I want her dead. Okay. You fight and you kill her. How do you feel? And she said, good. I said, how? Or she said, happy. I said, how long are you happy? And think for a minute of what she said. I'm going to guess, because I've done this with many, many live audiences, I'm going to guess that you think she said forever. It's not what she said. She said all day. In 2020, the answer, at least in Philadelphia, would be a minute, okay? All day. And I said, what happens the next day? And she said, I get probation. I said, no, because you planned this. This is first-degree murder. You're going to go to jail. How's your mom feeling now that you're in jail? And she realized that her mom was ashamed. Again, she's coming up with the answer. When you're in jail, are you going to be able to have kids? No kids. I don't have that written, but it's what we said. When you're in jail, are you going to be able to finish your education? No education. When you get out of jail, are you going to be able to get a good job? No job. And she took it all the way out, a little dramatic for my taste, to dying poor with no family. But think about it. Is that not a realistic place you're going to go to if you kill someone when you are 14? And I think you're going to say that the answer is yes. Suppose you don't kill her. Suppose you don't fight. How do you feel? And she said, angry. How long are you angry? And she said, all day. And we let her finish school, have kids, and make her mom proud. That's 2 lives saved in 15 minutes. Do you think that's brilliant? So I'm secretly hoping that all of you are behind your computers going, that man is brilliant right now, so that I can respond. This isn't brilliant at all, right? This is literally a lecture. You don't have to have a medical school education. Heck, you don't have to have an 8th grade education to understand this, right? It's the delivery style. Once you teach your staff how to talk to kids and how to break things down in a way that is mathematically a way that their concrete brains can absorb it, that restores control to them so that they make decisions so that they get it, got it, own it, the rest will take care of itself, right? It's all about the style. The next kid, another big concept is whether you control your destiny or the world just happens to you. This is called locus of control. Also a 14-year-old girl comes to me, I'm on her insurance card. She needs a 9th grade physical. She comes to me and she wants to be an architect when she grows up because she wants to build buildings for poor kids. She's smart as a whip. She's in a girl gang. And that gang, which is run by her 16-year-old cousin who has shot and killed 2 people but never been caught. This girl wants to be the architect. She wants to escape the gang, but she has no idea how. At this point in my career, this is more than 20 years ago. At this point in my career, my main focus was youth violence. But she's seeing me by coincidence, right? So I said everything I know how to say. I gave her one idea after another. And each time she responded the same way, which was, you don't know what you're talking about. So by the fifth time she said that, I got fed up and I said, excuse me, I'm an internationally respected expert on youth violence. Not really, right? If a kid says you don't know what you're talking about, what does that mean? It means you don't know what you're talking about. Back off, get back to one of your core youth development principles, which is the kids are the expert in their own lives, and make the kid think through it. And so I said, here's what I know. Here you are today, running with gangs. And one possibility for you is being an architect, where you're gonna be able to build your community. But another possibility is death. And I gotta be honest with you, you're gonna bring other people down too. So it's destruction. I know what my job is, right? My job is to get you to your best future and to prevent you from dying. But I'm spent. I've said everything I know and I'm kind of out of ideas. But here's what I do know. I know that there are paths in both directions, and that along those paths, there are many steps. And when you just look far into the distance, it can be really overwhelming. But if you just look at one step, and then you get on the right road and everything else becomes easier. Tell me what you think you can do in order to die. And she said, that's easy. I have to do exactly what I'm doing. I said, give me just one step towards becoming an architect. And she thought about it and she couldn't come up with anything. And she said to me, I guess I'm going to die. Then I do my work on the doctor roll papers that are on beds, you know, that keep the beds clean. And I ripped it off and she said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm cleaning up. And she said, direct quote, that's not trash, that's my map to a positive future. And I said, will you come back next week? She comes back next week. She takes it out of her knapsack, the map, and she said, Dr. Ken, I failed you. What do you mean? I took this out every night and I thought about what I could do and I can't come up with anything. I guess I'm gonna die. So think for a minute of what you would say now. So here's the truth. Anything that is concrete, a concrete suggestion, I had already tried and failed the week before. I've got to return the power to her. This has to be based on an action she took, not advice I offer. So I said, you came back to hear a little man talk to you and you don't think you're on the right road? And she achieved locus of control. And once she did, honestly, it was verbal diarrhea. It was like, Dr. Ken, you might think my mom's trash. That's a quote from her. You might think my mom's trash because I'm in a gang and stuff, but she's working 3 jobs. Because did you know that if I go to become an architect, I have to go to school after college? And she wants my little brother to go to college too, so she's working 3 jobs. She's a good lady. But you know what? My cousin always says I can't break with the gang because that's like letting go of family. But you know what? My mom's family and my cousin loves her. What about if I begin hanging out with my mom? How would that be? And I said, that's a great idea. Bring your mom in next week. And now we did what I call good news, bad news of adolescent caregiving, and also another chapter in reaching teens. So what happens now? The mother is coming for you to include her. What is she coming to hear? She's coming to hear bad news. And how do people respond to bad news? With fear, with anger, and with shame. And here's what you need to know. If you are working with populations that have traditionally been marginalized or oppressed, you are now the man. And whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, whether you're fluid, whoever you are now the man, meaning an authority figure. And what did authority figures traditionally do 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when we thought parents were not doing a good job? We took the kids away. As a result, when you just break bad news to a parent will often become very defensive in order to make you know they have it in control. So like, didn't I tell you to keep your legs closed? Didn't I tell you if you ever went out on the streets, blah, blah, blah. It's a performance for you. And in fact, if you ever see that the mom is gonna call the grandma to get advice, it might go south. Why? Because the grandma is saying, don't say anything to them, they're gonna take their kids away. So what we have to do, we can't take away fear, we can't take away anger, but by golly, we can take away shame. Because the truth is that if the kid has allowed you to bring the family in, they've got something going for them. Ma'am, thank you so much for coming in today. You know, I work with kids all the time, and the law says that the information they tell me needs to be kept private without their permission. At this point, literally every mother says, that law is wrong, and then they follow up with, I wipe their behind, or something like that. And you go, I understand why you may feel like that, man, but the reason that the law exists is because a lot of people have parents they can't talk to, and this guarantees that they'll have responsible adults. But you know what? That law doesn't matter today. Do you know what your daughter said to me? She said, yeah, my mom blows off steam. Sometimes she gets sad or disappointed, but she always sticks by me, and I need her now. So I don't know what you did, but you did something so well. Thank you, thank you, thank you for that, and for coming in today. Now you're working from a strength-based way from the mom, which is going to turn down the need to condemn the child, turn up the need to support the child, and now you've got a partnership. This mom was utterly brilliant. This mom understood how to get her daughter away from the gang. This was during the era of beepers. So every time the girl was getting into what could be a gang conflict, she beeped her mom. The mom beeped her back and said, hey, I got to shift off work. And the cousin literally said, go be with my auntie, right? While the mother was moving from west to southwest Philly, which as a crow flies is about a mile. This girl made it to college, all right? So with that said, we're gonna move into, we're still gonna be talking about control, but this is a natural place for us to take a 10-minute break. It is by my watch, 11:24. I'm gonna start again at 11:34 sharp. Thank you.